I will not be directly discussing story spoilers here, however I will need to talk about gameplay elements and locations that are not unlocked until Chapter 5, and the footage you will see me using in the background of this video will involve the new DLC hero, and the classes I have on some of my party members may be considered spoilers. While Xenoblade series ones have had a pretty good track record of actually being pretty informative, well, that aged horribly. The Xenoblade 3 version 1.2 patch notes do not contain everything in the patch, so I am probably going to be missing several things in this video just because no one has been able to make a comprehensive list of everything that was changed. The first 3 bullet points in the actual notes are under game spec additions and changes, and the first bullet point is very straightforward: added function to receive expansion pass 2. This is very easy. This patch coincides with the first bit of DLC, so this is the first bit of the DLC. If you have not been able to access it, you do actually need to go into the expansion pass option in the main menu and select that, and that will allow you to receive the 2 new quests, one for challenge mode and one for the new hero, and that's really it. Not much else to say other than this wave of DLC is really just the storyline of Ino's quests, because her class itself is kind of mediocre. Her unique gimmick of being able to upgrade herself using an upgrade tree does not carry over to Ouroboros characters using her class, and since heroes are much lower power than any of the Ouroboros, that's virtually useless. And this wave of challenge battle is based on Xenoblade Definitive Editions instead of Xenoblade 2, which means it's less interesting, and it is also very easy, so unfortunately, this DLC wave is massively lacking in comparison to the comparable wave from Xenoblade 2, which not only included Shulk and Fiora, but also a much more robust challenge mode. Admittedly, we are still prior to the point in the patch cycle where Xenoblade 2 received its additional difficulty settings, so it is possible that challenge mode will become more interesting if a harder mode and custom difficulty are also added, but I have to say, even without that, it is still weaker than what 2 had at this point in time. As for the second bullet point, the availability of soy primo sauce was previously restricted outside of the progress of a certain quest, so now the city caravan shop located in the city will sell soy primo sauce. This is basically a new quality of life thing, because soy primo sauce is a necessary ingredient to cook a specific dish, so making it infinitely accessible means you are now able to always cook that dish without having to spend Napon coins. It seems like, despite the fact that they're not actually gacha currency that can be purchased with microtransactions, they are ensuring that anything that can be bought with Napon coins can also be completed normally, no matter what. And that's just a nice thing, I guess. Not really anything else to say. Technically, this is another money sink, although, let's be real, money is still basically worthless in this game. Then, for the final thing here, increase the effect time bonus for fusion arts using the Flash Fencer's acceleration art. I'm gonna be real, this is obviously supposed to be a buff to Flash Fencer, but I have no idea what that bullet point is trying to say. Acceleration is a stance art that increases both art and auto attack speed while also increasing your damage taken by 25%, and it doesn't mention fusion arts at all in its art description, and also without actual numbers being given for the amount it speeds you up. Thank you Xenoblade 3 art descriptions for not actually including enough information to accurately tell everything about an art. I'm not sure what this actually means. My best guess is that when using acceleration in a fusion art, the duration of the stance is now longer. So of course, feel free to test that and comment if you want to. I'm not going to be doing it because, I'm gonna be real, acceleration is not the reason I level Flash Fencer, it's capable hands and cross impact. Moving on to the second category of the notes, we have fixes, and the first bullet point is the long-awaited end to the Gogol Fruit saga, as it reads: fixed Collectopedia items, Gogol Dalm and Gogol Olipal, previously unobtainable in version 1.1.1, so they can now be acquired. You can get all the Gogol Fruit. It is now possible to legitimately complete every single Collectopedia card in the game, while updated to the same latest version. We're good on this now. Alright. Next up, fixed an issue in which a character's audio of falling in battle would play over the sound of them falling down before the screen faded to black. This is an interesting bug fix with regards to character voice lines. In addition to fall damage, Xenoblades 1, 2, and 3 all have bottomless pits that will also kill you if you jump in them, and 1 and 2 had specific voice lines pertaining to dying in that way, in addition to the normal voice lines that come from dying from damage, be it in battle or from fall damage. 3 appeared to not have voice lines like that, However, it seems to have been a bug and not a case of those lines not existing, as due to some issue, the regular damage-based lines would play on top of the falling ones, and as such, the falling ones would not play. So now those are all completely audible, and you can listen to them if you want to. This is an objectively good change, but not really anything I can talk a lot about. The last actual bullet point is the usual Nintendo thing of fixed additional issues to improve the gameplay experience. This means that any changes not listed above fall under that vague bullet point, so let's talk about the few I know about and prove just how ridiculous that is. The first is related to voice lines again. This is obviously anecdotal evidence because they didn't say it in the patch notes, but as far as I can tell, they have adjusted the frequency of various post-battle conversations occurring so you don't constantly get spammed by the same few things. I streamed for roughly 3 hours doing Eno-related stuff in some challenge mode, and throughout that time, I think I only got Girl with the Gall like 3 or 4 times, and I never got something a bit meatier or Lance being the MVP, so it definitely seems like they made things a lot more equal, so you're not constantly just hearing the same few ones. I'm glad that they are learning from what they did in Xenoblade 2, because the Ardanian soldiers became a meme because they kept spamming "Think You Could Take Me, Don't Forget Me," and the response to that was not just changing the frequency, but also cutting down or removing some of the lines, despite them being iconic memes, whereas in this case, you're still gonna hear Girl with the Gall, it's just less frequent, when the frequency was the only thing people were actually complaining about. So it's good to see that despite a lot of 3's negative points clearly coming from overcorrection to criticisms of 2, they are legitimately learning and doing things completely properly in some cases. I have seen some discussion about entirely new voice lines being added to post-battle or battle conversations, but I'm not entirely sure about that because I don't know what other people experienced going through the game initially, so I can't tell if new lines were added, or someone has just heard an existing line for the first time due to the frequency change. That being said, all 6 of the main characters have brand new voice lines between Eno's quests and challenge mode, and it's pretty easy to tell based on a couple of the performances that these were recorded in, at the very least, a different session to the main game, so it is more than possible that they recorded new non-cutscene dialogue if the sessions for this DLC stuff took place after the release of the main game, when the developers would have been able to note the complaint that there wasn't enough variety and actually called for more lines to be added. Do keep in mind, just due to the massive approval process and the amount of time it actually takes to do something in game development, and the fact that we're basically getting some form of patch every month, it's very likely that a patch is already completed and just needs to be sent out for approval and final testing at the time the previous patch has come out. So that means that the 1.1.1 changes were most likely all bugs that were known about when the game released, and they did not completely have time to fix. So this is probably the first patch where actual complaints people had after the release of the game are being taken into account. And every single thing is going to be at least a month behind what people are currently talking about. So say there was a big complaint about Eno's class being too underpowered, we wouldn't be likely to see any buff to it until the update after whatever comes next. Specifically with regards to voice lines, we don't really know how many recording sessions are being done for the actual DLC. It's possible that whenever the cast recorded their lines for all the new stuff in this patch, they also recorded things related to the rest of Challenge Mode and the second DLC hero, and potentially the big story expansion if their character is also present in that, but it could also very easily be possible, especially depending on the actual amount of voiced content and all of that there's going to be a different recording block for every single major update, so it is more than possible for even more voice lines to be added if those actors are already going to be present recording things that they need to for the DLC. This mostly depends on the localization process and how far ahead the Japanese team actually has all of the writing for the DLC stuff set in stone and obviously the Japanese voice recording done, so it's kind of impossible to tell, and it's more than likely that the English cast does need to do multiple recording blocks, while the Japanese cast, who gets access to the stuff earlier, could do it all in one. But it is just worth mentioning that we might not have seen the end of new voice lines entirely. On the other hand, while the 6 main Ouroboros characters and Riku all receive new voice lines in this patch, Manana is completely silent, so it is possible that we have unfortunately seen the last of her. Well, the whole voice line thing is a bit of a diversion because it's not directly backed up by anything you can empirically tell within the game and is mostly anecdotal evidence. There are two other things that were altered that are not mentioned in the patch notes. The first one is somewhat minor but still important, and the second is a really big, really good new feature to be added to the game. As for the first one, it is a tweak in localization lines, at least in the English version, specifically pertaining to the effects of certain skills and accessories that make what they actually do a lot clearer. While I'm not sure of everything that was changed because I obviously haven't checked through every single menu in the game to compare things, what I noticed specifically was the Thaumaturge skill Ultimate Qigong and accessories that have similar effects, where instead of being very vague about what it does, it explicitly states that the damage of the character that skill or accessory is equipped to will be dealt as if the enemy's defense were a certain percentage lower. This is a bit wordier and still might be a little confusing, but it is necessary, I think, to go along with a lot of Xenoblade 3's small quality of life things, where, in response to 2 having a few confusing descriptions, they make it very clear what something does, even if it is a bit wordier than it might necessarily need to be. This is sort of the same thing as making an explicit distinction between percent and percentage points when it comes to values like critical hit rate or defenses that are expressed with a percentage number on the stat screen. This is obviously an objectively good change, but in the grand scheme of things, unless a lot more descriptions were altered than I know about, a relatively minor one. However, the second thing I need to talk about is massive. A brand new feature accessible to any player of the game, you do not need the expansion pass for it, and that is customizable character loadouts. You now have 15 slots to which you can save your entire team composition, that is, classes, arts, skills, accessories, gems, and hero, and they're even able to be named and customized properly so that you can better distinguish them. You can switch to them at will, and go back and edit them again later, so that's really, really important, especially if you're leveling up different classes or experimenting with different builds but want to save what you had before. That's a very, very big deal, and they just didn't say anything about it. People were able to tell it existed before the patch came out because the prompt was visible in Ino's reveal trailer, but they never advertised it as part of the patch. The only time it appeared on any official Twitter account is Japanese only, which means besides literally seeing that the prompt exists in the menu now, the only places you can find out about it are the in-game tutorial and the little blurb about 1.2 on the title screen. As for the latter, there are two issues with that. The first is that nobody who really wants to know granular detail about stuff being included in a patch is going to be checking the title screen blurb, because the one for 1.1.1 had so much less information than the official patch notes, so everyone just was going to check the official patch notes, which now don't have this very important feature in them. And it's also right next to the information about the expansion pass related stuff in 1.2, so it's slightly hard to tell that it's actually free and you don't need the DLC to buy it. As for the in-game tutorial, that has its own issue. Namely, I never got the tutorial for it until after I beat my first fight in challenge mode, which means that even DLC owners that don't immediately jump on it might not even know it exists unless they start looking in the menu for prompts that weren't there beforehand. So while this is a fantastic addition to the series that I hope every future game will have, and it's going to be very hard to go back to older games that lack it now that it exists, it's extremely bad form on Nintendo's part to not tell anyone that it was added to the game. My only guess is that if you don't have the DLC or you're not on a completed save file like I was, you can get the tutorial in a different place. Challenge Battle is locked behind the beginning of Chapter 3 of the main story, so it's possible that at some other point in Chapter 3, they added a new flag that will also play that tutorial if you're going through the game your first time. But either way, it is extremely stupid to include a fantastic new feature and then just hope people notice it on their own. Basically, besides the DLC content itself being somewhat underwhelming, this is a great patch. It just would be a lot better if Nintendo actually told us everything that was going to be included in it, so hopefully they step up their reporting game by the time the next patch comes out. The rest of this video is just going to be speculation as to when the next patches are going to come out, but I have one more 1.2 related thing to mention before you can feel free to go if all you wanted to know about was this patch. In the datamine for the new 1.2 content, an unfinished piece of artwork for the second DLC hero has been found. So that silhouette in the expansion pass menu does have an unfinished and possibly outdated design, face and body to go with it. I'm not going to show the image here or even give my opinion on it, just know that it is out there. If you want to see it, you can find it, and there are many places where people are discussing it, but if you're just here for the 1.2 stuff, that's all I've got. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe for more Xenoblade 3 patch reviews in the future, and just more content about Xenoblade 3 and the Xeno series as a whole. And until then, this is Luxon, signing off. For those of you who want more tinfoily conspiracy theories about when the game will get updates, I got a few more minutes for you. If you remember, Wave 3 of the DLC, which includes the second hero and the second half of Challenge Mode, only has a release date of by April 30th, 2023. However, since that is 6 months away, it's likely we're going to get at least one patch just of bug fixes long before then. My guess would be, if they keep on the same schedule they've been using for 3, which is very similar to the one for 2, we'll get 1.2.1 at some point in November or early December, which will include bug fixes, possibly related specifically to things in 1.2 DLC content. And then at some point, my guess would be early to mid-January after the holidays, we'll get 1.3, which includes more substantial fixes and may include actual new free features like additional difficulty options, or possibly even free heroes, maybe something like the chain attack music toggle or something. Then, after that, a 1.3.1 with additional bug fixes, which, if we go by the same schedule, takes us to somewhere between mid-March and mid-April for 1.4, which would contain the next wave of DLC. As for the final wave with the story expansion, its projected release date is just sometime in 2023. It will be out by the end of the year. And you might be noticing that that gives a very big window, even if Wave 3 comes out right near the end of its projected time. There are a few ways where you could predict when it comes out, but since it's basically developing an entire new game, there's a lot more things that could push it back or even push it forwards, especially because the base game already seems to have been pushed forward by 2 months, so we can't even say, oh, Torna came out 9 months after the base game of Xenoblade 2, it's going to be in May, because it might be operating 9 months after the original release date, which would put it in July instead. And honestly, I think mid to late summer or fall is the most likely time for it to release. While Torna did come out within a month from the last bit of base game DLC in 2, which was Elma being added to Challenge Mode and as a Blade, 2 kinda drip-fed DLC a lot more frequently than 3 has already, and actually seems to contain more content than 3's expansion pass, so especially if the story DLC is actually bigger than Torna, I could see it taking a bit longer compared to the base game. And then lastly, for this one we need to put on our very cynical Nintendo marketing hats, Xenoblade 3 is selling very well for the type of game it is. On par, if not even better, than Xenoblade 2, which, at least for now, is the best-selling Xeno game in the entire Meta franchise, that is, including the pre-Nintendo stuff, so Nintendo is probably going to want to get expansion pass sales. You know what they did for Xenoblade 2 to do that? They put the first trailer for Torna the Golden Country in the 2018 E3 Direct. So I'm thinking, even if the expansion is actually done at that point in time, and unless they need to fill a hole in their release schedule, they're going to save it for after E3, or the E3 adjacent Nintendo Direct, at least by a couple weeks, so they can have the bonus of putting the big reveal trailer for the big bit of the expansion pass in the presentation that everyone's going to be watching. And this goes doubly if the premise of the expansion is something big and fan servicey, which there's a decent chance it is. So yeah, I'm thinking July at the earliest for whatever the big expansion story is, which is fine. I don't mind waiting for it if it's a quality product. But yeah, I literally already did the outro, so thanks for watching for the little extra credits bit that probably is going to be completely disproved as soon as we get a release date for 1.2.1. See you next video, I guess.